we are, September 8th, 2023, approaching the Orkney Islands of Scotland. Woohoo!
Welcome back to Sailing Northern Breeze. In episode 18, we'll sail on from Stromness, visiting more of the Orkney Isles, and then on to Tiny Fair Isle, and finally make our way to Lerwick in the Shetlands. But before we start this journey, I'd like to thank all of you who commented on our last episode, letting us know where in the world you are. We've gotten responses from 4 continents, as far away as Korea and Santiago, Chile, and closer to home in Canada and the USA, from Ontario, Quebec, BC, and then Seattle and Wichita. And then, of course, our UK friends from Cambridge, the Lake District, Edinburgh, and even Robin Hood country, as well as Norway, France, Holland, Israel, and Italy. It's amazing. We're pleased to have been able to share our journeys close to home and far away. Thanks for watching. We're on our way to Norway. It's now the middle of September, and we're making our way north. We begin here in Stromness and visit a few of the Stone Age ruins while we wait for weather, before next heading through the islands and then leave the Isles of Orkney. This map shows the Old Man of Hoy's location that we passed a few days ago on our way from the mainland. Once landed in Stromness, we visited the Ring of Brodgar, Skara Brae, Rousay, Kirkwall, and Westray before sailing onward. We're still awed by the ruins, the 4,000-year-old stones of Stromness, the Ring of Brodgar, and the buildings at Barnhouse. They are contemporaries of the First and Second Dynasties in Egypt. This display shows some of the preliminary excavations of the buildings at Barnhouse. This location near the stones of Stromness and Brodgar wasn't only ceremonial, as residences have been found here. Amazing. The stones of Stromness are shown here, a few hundred meters away, with sheep keeping the lawn well maintained. And across the isthmus, the Ring of Brodgar, on the other hand, it isn't maintained by sheep. It remains wild, standing silent across 4 millennia. It's very dramatic when quietly appreciated. During our walks about Stromness, we happened upon Logan's Well. We weren't aware of this. It has a more recent history, but still very significant. The Hudson's Bay Company ships topped up their stores and water here for over 200 years before crossing the Atlantic. 250 years ago, Captain Cook's ships loaded fresh water here before their fantastic journey around the world. And then in 1845, tragic Sir John Franklin and his ships stopped here as well before setting off to find the Northwest Passage, the shipping route to Asia across Canada's frozen north. This history is familiar to Canadians. The Erebus and the Terror were lost, frozen in the ice in the Victoria Strait and Nunavut. After a year in the ice, the remaining crew of the original 129 souls abandoned ships and headed out south overland, and they also perished. Oral history provided by the Inuit people helped many expeditions search for the ships in the 1800s and into the 1900s, and then they were finally located. They were found sunken by a Parks Canada expedition in 2014 and 2016. Cook, Franklin, and us, we've all stood at this spot over 250 years. Kirkwall also has a massive cathedral and a couple of palaces. There is much history here, but I'll not cover that today. After 3 days in Stromness, we sailed north again to the Isle of Rousay, past Skara Brae, and on to see more history. It was a short 26-mile sail through a bit of a tidal race, which we're now getting used to. The winds and tides take a lot of funny turns here.
The first question is, what are those 2 flags? And the second question is, which way is the wind going? He can't seem to make up his mind, can it? Because those flags are telling you it's that. Kind of hard to sail when the wind's doing that. We're going around the big headland. And another one behind us.
We've arranged a tour for the following day with Paddy McGuire of Rousay Tours to see this small island. Paddy was great and gave us most of his day at a good price, sharing a lot of knowledge of the island today and of its distant past. Paddy told us of Rousay and the many neighboring islands that we could see, some inhabited, some not. These funny little birds, oyster catchers, were the entertainment during our lunch on the North Shore. We lapped the island counterclockwise, seeing the vastness of the sea and the ruggedness of the coast. There are very few trees on these isles, so no real protection from the wind. Our first Neolithic stop was at the site of Midhow, where we entered a tomb and a broch.
Which is nearly 5,500 years old. The rounded structure to the right, just directly below us here, is a broch.
The tomb was built in the Iron Age, over 30 meters or 100 feet long, with stone walls over 3 meters or 10 feet thick. The remains of 9 individuals were found crouched in these stalls, with another 16 individuals also discovered in the tomb. It was excavated in 1933, and soon after a structure was put in place to protect it. Close by, a few hundred meters away, is the Midhow Broch. Brochs were communal living structures built on the Scottish coasts, also in the Iron Age, often within sight of each other, perhaps for protection. They are also huge stone structures, but they served as living quarters with a well and a hearth discovered in the Midhow Broch. We then visited a smaller tomb at Blackhammer. It is of similar design and also now protected by a roof. The last stop on our Rousay tour was Taversow Took. This is much older, built sometime between 4,000 and 6,000 years ago. It is much smaller, but had similar benches where remains of several individuals were found during excavation in 1898. It has 2 chambers stacked on top of each other.
So when this was excavated because of the picnic thing, right, by Liza, was the bottom one also excavated at the time, or just this top one was?
They were down a bit. They didn't dig it out completely. It was only Grant in the 1930s that meticulously took every piece of rubbish and stuff off it and got to the tomb.
This wiggles. Everything wiggles.
In fact, you can see the benches quite clearly there.
Yeah, it's the first time we've seen the benches still in place.
Yes.
All 4 of them, and then the tunnel.
Yeah. In fact, particularly the 2 on each side, one each side, they're well and truly embedded into the sidewall.
Yeah, nobody's taken those out.
No, without destroying everything, yeah.
During our tour, we watched the currents along our passage from the day before, running between Orkney mainland and Rousay.
The main one is conflicting current, because the Atlantic from our right here meets the North Sea from the other side, and they meet down here, and a combination of the current, wind speed, wind direction, depth of wind. This is the choppiest it's been now for a few days. And nobody in their right mind takes a small boat into the stretches here.
Yeah, it's like surf almost down here.
The little island here is called Ain Hallow. Originally, Ain Helga was its name, which means Holy Island. And this was the other island that was cleared of people, much smaller scale, but for a different reason. It was owned mid-1800s by a guy called Colonel Balfour, who also owned the island Donegal Way. He also tore the roofs off the cottages so they wouldn't go back again. And it was then that they really only discovered that one of the small cottages had been a small monastery, probably built in the 12th century. So it was rediscovered during the clearance in 1851. Nobody lives on the island anymore. And see the water either side, you can see some on the other side as well, to the right of the last two turbines there. The water's very choppy.
So today is September 13th, and we are making our way, a bit unfortunately, back to Kirkwall. There's a gale getting ready to blow in, and we have decided to come on back to the mainland of the Isle of Orkney and take cover in Kirkwall. Gale winds are supposed to be as high as 50 or 60 knots, which can be as much as 72 miles an hour. Yeah. So, this is town of Kirkwall. It's 9:30 in the morning. First time we've come into port without sailing all night this early.
After a great tour, we spent the night on a mooring ball and then headed to port for safety. Rousay to Kirkwall was only a 10-mile journey, but again, we had to manage the tidal rips between the islands. This slide shows a red arrow, which at this time of day would have been on our nose, so we made sure to make this passage when it was in our favor. The harbor quickly loses its depth as we approach the shore, but we were able to find a spot along this pier without much trouble of grounding. We had met the folks on the sailing ship Rockhopper at Stromness, and they arrived here a little after we did, also seeking shelter from the oncoming storm. This boat is from Colorado in the USA. I'm not sure how they sailed it from Colorado here, but they did. Registrations are tricky. Luckily, we were able to find a place to relax, close to the harbor, and made the best of our time here. After a couple of days, most of the weather had passed, and we started our journey to Fair Isle. We needed help to get off the dock from Rockhopper and others. We had a 20-knot wind pinning us onto the dock, and our normal springing off two-handed didn't work. The wind had also pushed the floating dock sideways to the limits of its tight chain anchors, and one of these chains caught our keel as we tried to move forward. So therefore, we couldn't move forward, and we had no real room aft. So with the help of Rockhopper on the dock and a few locals, we were able to spring to a 45-degree angle and reverse off the dock into those 20-knot winds. I'm not sure that we could have done it without them. Thank you, guys. We again had tidal currents to manage, and this 45-minute delay put us a little at risk of missing our windows. Here, the red arrows representing currents are what we want, and we headed out to catch them. There are two narrow sections on our way to Westray. The first is between Vasa Point and the scary Vasa, and these things are scary. Through this 100-meter wide gap, the water is shallow, less than 5 meters. We don't have much room for error, and GPS has its limitations in accuracy, so we're nervous that we're actually where we need to be as we pass through here, with the tide rips and the turbulent waters. The second narrow section, recommended by the locals over the other passages, was a little wider at about 200 meters, but we had brisk winds and currents all day, so I had to be careful here as well. It was a long day, but we safely arrived at Kirkwall Harbor on Westray in good time before sunset.
Okay, so today is September 15th, Friday. We're coming into the port of Westray Marina. Westray is a small island on the northwest outer groupings of the Orkney Islands. As you can hear the wind, it is a cold day and windy. I'm glad to get all attached up to the dock and call it a day. Looks like a nice town. Dock's right in front of us, the port or harbor. I guess it's about a mile walk into town.
It's a tiny harbor with enough depth for our draft only in the middle, where we thankfully found an open berth. The following morning, we set off for tiny Fair Isle. It's a 46-mile planned route. However, as we rounded North Rousay, the currents pushed us several miles to the east, causing our journey to be over 50 miles. We made good time again with brisk winds and arrived around dinner time after a couple of tacks. This is also a small harbor with space for only a couple of boats. The island hosts a bird sanctuary, and bird watching tourism bring most of the visitors to the island.
First sight of Shetland. Woohoo! Hard to see here, but there it is.
Welcome to Fair Isle. Today is September 16th, 2023. It was a heck of a journey to get here today. The cross currents were so strong, blew us off course probably about 7 miles, and because of the direction of the wind, it really wasn't out of the north as it was expected. We struggled to pull up wind and get back on course. But we did, and we're coming through the north side of Fair Isle. We're going right into there. Fair Isle.
S.B. Muggle was already here when we arrived, so we found a spot between them and the ferry. There wouldn't have been room for very many other boats. Fair Isle has a population of around 65 people, depending on the year.
What you got to say for yourself? I bet you do. Giddy up!
It is very pristine and beautiful. We saw lots of birds and sheep, and only one local who was doing some work at the pier. This place is well worth a visit for serenity and nature. The pier is somewhat limited in depth, as you can see by the sign. It seems to be changing. But it was enough for us. The modern picture on this sign, however, caught our attention. While this is a very nice aspect of the island, no rats, I'm not sure what I should do with this information. Is it a backhanded way of telling me to keep all of the rats on my boat from coming ashore? Perhaps, but if I had rats, I'm not sure that I could keep them on my boat. Thankfully, I don't have to try, as we don't have any rats, or mice, or cockroaches, or other pests on our boat. That is one big advantage of sailing the Arctic seas. No cockroaches. Message received. Compliance assured. No rats were offloaded here. We enjoyed a beverage with our new neighbors from Muggle and had an early night. Our final leg of this UK passage began before sunrise once again to manage the tides between the Shetland Islands later this afternoon. We are out of the harbor by 5:13 a.m. for the 40-mile crossing. What a beautiful sunrise on the North Sea. Over that way is Norway. We had about 2 meters of swell, great winds, clear skies, which made for a beautiful sail. That early start was worth it.
Here we are, September 17th, coming into the mainland of
As we approach the islands, we see one of the most intact brochs, the Broch of Rousay. It is the tallest broch still standing, at 44 feet or 13 meters tall. Unfortunately, conditions weren't appropriate for anchoring, so we did not stop to visit it today.
Looks beautiful in here, right? No big deal. But out there, the swells are substantial. Every once in a while, it hits the northern breeze right on her starboard back quarter and takes us.
We had a calm entrance into Lerwick, past the Lerwick Boating Club, a tiny replica Viking ship, and into the visitor berths next to the Albert Dock on the Victoria Pier. So that's it for episode 18. I'll wrap up with a couple of things. We arrived at our last port, before the 200-mile crossing of the North Sea to finally reach Norway. We'll wait here for a weather window and cross in our next episode. That crossing starts out with patience, then some nice sailing, and finishes with a little excitement. And thanks this week goes out to Paddy McGuire from Rousay Tours and to the folks on the docks, the local harbor master at Stromness who took time out of his Sunday to help us fuel up, and importantly to the locals and the crew of Rockhopper who helped us off that floating dock chain at Kirkwall with a 45-degree spring off the dock. We'll see you all soon in our next episode.